with Gordon Kerr, EuRA's strategic consultant for legal services, and takes a slightly different format in that he's going to take us through some of the legal issues that are facing relocation companies right now during the coronavirus pandemic. You can contact Gordon through our website. Just go to the About Us tab and you'll find Meet the Team. Or you can post questions directly into the LinkedIn EuRA Legal Peer-to-Peer group, which you can find by searching LinkedIn. This interview took place on the 30th of April, so bear in mind things may have changed. Hello, and welcome back to our series of interviews with our members and colleagues across the world. It's my great pleasure today to talk with Gordon Kerr, who, as you know, is EuRA's strategic consultant for all things legal. And this is a slightly different interview in that Gordon's just written an updated article on, legal issues that are facing relocation companies at the moment. So we're going to go through that. And that article is live on the coronavirus page on the EuRA website. So just go seek it out. And it will also be in the European, which is coming out at the end of this week. So first of all, Gordon, it's really nice to see you. How are you?
I'm very well, enjoying life in lockdown here in Edinburgh. Fortunately, we have my daughter and her partner who moved up here from London just before lockdown, moving away from a tiny one-bedroom flat where they were both trying to work from home. So it was great that we were able to have them here, and yeah, it's a lot of fun actually, in the sense that we take turns cooking and whiskey tasting and playing cards and trying to avoid just watching Netflix all the time. So,
yes.
but yeah, so by the standards of how people are, we're certainly in that lucky category.
Well, I'm very pleased to hear it. I mean, what, as you know, I lived in Edinburgh and I know the city well, and it's a city that I love. How are things in Edinburgh, the capital of Scotland?
Yeah, I would say people are responding very positively to the social distancing rules. I mean, what you really notice is how quiet the traffic is. So normally busy roads are very quiet. When I'm out walking the dog, I'm just strolling along, hardly any background traffic noise. More cyclists around, more wobbly cyclists, because it's obviously people who haven't been on a bike for some time. So that's quite amusing at times. But it's really nice to see, mum and dad and 3 kids following in order, like something out of The Sound of Music, going along hillsides and tracks and things.
Brilliant.
So I would say Edinburgh is very quiet in noise terms, but yeah, people are out running, walking, cycling, and generally complying with the 2-meter distancing rule.
And how about things like, I mean, for those of you who don't know Edinburgh, there's a huge park in the centre. It's actually a mountain called Arthur's Seat, which is a huge gathering place, and it's been Easter weekend and the weather's been lovely. Are the parks still open?
Yeah, the parks are still open, and again, I think the police are monitoring to make sure that people are using the parks for exercise rather than for gatherings and barbecues, that kind of thing. But as I say, I think people are being fairly respectful of the law, because there's a good reason behind it. And so the parks are, I guess you'd say they're busy, but social distancing is being respected. So there's no problem yet. I mean, I dare say there will be individual incidents where people maybe are a bit stupid, but from what I can see and from what I hear in the news, yeah, things are going pretty well.
I think it's really interesting that, I mean, obviously we've been having these, talking to a lot of people during these interviews, and for example, Michelle Bramstoft was saying to me that the parks in Copenhagen, for people to be more careful about social distancing, they've actually put arrows up so that you walk in a specific direction so that you can stay away from people. I just think it's very interesting.
Yeah, actually on that, one rider to what I said, and it's interesting, if you go into a park and where there's a children's play area, with swings, you may find that that's closed off, that
Yeah.
the local authority are trying to avoid that kind of natural coming together of kids and parents.
Yeah.
So that's the one exception. It seems a bit odd, but I can understand exactly why they've done it. But that apart, yeah, parks are fully open.
It makes perfect sense. And I think the other interesting thing that's come out of this for me over the last couple of weeks, or at least something that I've started to notice, is there's actually quite a lot of social pressure now on people to obey the rules. I think because everyone's working so hard to get this over with so quickly and to protect the health services and the health workers, that there is a kind of moral responsibility.
Yeah, I think so. This is not just about it's the rules. I think we've passed that stage. The relentless nature of the messaging coming out every time you switch on the news. Yeah, it definitely has got past the, oh, well, why are we being restricted in this way? No, I think people get it, they're supportive. And it's lovely to see things like the Thursday evening, 8 p.m., everyone out at their garden gates applauding the National Health Service and other workers. So there is still that sense of, yeah, we're all in this together. Now, how long that continues, as pressure maybe starts to build up in the next few weeks for the lockdown to be loosened, we may still be in, if I could describe it as the honeymoon phase of the lockdown. So I'm not suggesting that there's anything special about Scottish or British people that makes them happy about this or more law-abiding, but I think we're still in a pretty good phase on this.
I think you're absolutely right, and it's interesting to see, how we have to take our lead from other countries in Europe, I suppose. I mean, I read today Austria and Denmark are both now going to reduce restrictions to some degree over the next few weeks, which is interesting. And obviously talking to our colleagues in Spain and Italy, where the lockdown is very, very serious, you can't go outside. That's going to have to be looked at just from the point of view of we're all, going to have to stay sane. Thank you so much for the legal and financial update that you've done for us. As I said before, that's going to go onto the website this week, and it's in the European. Can we talk a bit about the issues that you raised? Because it is very interesting. Where would you like to start? I mean, you've broken it down into 5 categories: health and safety, financial health of businesses, contractual obligations, continuity, future working, and insurance. Talk me through where you're coming from in terms of, what you're thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I was very aware that this is a moment in time, and I know it's a point you make at the beginning of each talk as well, or each interview you do, that something you say today can almost look a bit silly tomorrow. But I felt it was worth trying to at least start the conversation going about how could this affect my relocation business in legal terms. And for me, the obvious starting point was health and safety. We are talking about this as of course, a moral and ethical issue. Every business has as its highest priority to look after its staff. But, it's also a formal legal requirement as well. And as we begin to come out of lockdown, I think it's worth reminding ourselves that we still have this continuing obligation to our staff. And where it may get a little bit more complicated is if some locations are released from lockdown and some services are released from lockdown, we could start seeing pressure from clients to, oh, well, can we now deliver that service? And it's worth reminding ourselves that it still is health and safety, not just as a moral obligation, though that comes first, but also as a technical legal obligation to make sure our staff's welfare is being looked after and is a priority. So I think at the moment, clearly, as part of all the national lockdowns that are happening, then that goes without saying that staff are being protected because they're at home. But as things loosen up, we just have to make sure that we're not endangering staff in any sense as we move from distancing to social contact again, and particularly for businesses operating around the world where there may be pressure from clients in one country as to, can you do this? If you're uncomfortable with it, your first responsibility is to your staff.
That's really interesting. And I mean, certainly with all of the people that I've been speaking to during these interviews at the beginning of the process, before lockdowns were imposed in different countries, that was very much at the forefront of the managers and the leaders within the destination service provider companies.
Yeah, I was really impressed by these interviews and the attitudes that EuRA members were taking on that. I mean, I also I chair a company in the estate agency world, and there you can see slightly different attitudes or pressures building up, where it's well, we can't do house viewings just now, but we'll do video viewings, and that's fine. But you can see there's pressure already to, oh, wouldn't it be possible to allow somebody to see this house so we can make an offer for the property? And I mean, partly the pressure comes from financial issues, and it's easy to take a kind of high-minded view of this. It's the right thing to do, but if you're watching your business cash diminish week after week after week, and the only way you can stop that is to start earning income, in this case from estate agency commissions again, you can understand the pressure that people are under. And most people will respond to that pressure and still comply with the law and do the right thing. But at the margins, there may be people who say, well, we can take a shortcut here. If it's a business that may no longer exist unless you can start bringing in income again within the next few weeks, then that's where these pressures come from. And it is of course why understanding the financial assistance that's available to your business is so important. And I think all countries in Europe have introduced pretty radical measures. When we think of the idea of being able to place staff on furlough and 80% their income is going to be made up by the government, the ability to stop making VAT payments, the rates that, as we call them in the UK, but local property taxes for businesses, again, being suspended in many countries. So, that whole range of financial assistance is meant to ensure that businesses do the right thing. And self-employed, in some ways even more remarkable, the fact that as a self-employed person, we can claim assistance from the government. So it's really important to understand the financial assistance that's available in your country, and to make sure that you're getting the maximum assistance that is available. And I'd encourage all EuRA members to get familiar with their government websites on coronavirus financial assistance, because sometimes they take quite a while for the actual cash to come through. So the sooner you're in the system, the better.
Yeah, again, that's very interesting, talking to the members, and as you've been watching the interviews as well. It's the implementation of the schemes. The idea is one thing. The implementation in some countries is certainly very different. I was talking to one of our members in Spain saying, yes, this is being rolled out, but at the moment we can't get anything. So cash flow is absolutely key. In the interim, like you say, between but getting yourself in the system now is really important, right?
Yeah, and And that sort of kind of led me on to think about, well, what are the other things a business can be doing? For example, contacting your commercial landlord, the landlord of your premises, to see whether it's possible to defer rental payments, whether it's possible to negotiate a discount just now for the next few months. And I know a number of businesses who've done that, and with some success. You know, that depends. There's no legal requirement on a landlord to negotiate a discount, but many of them are reasonably happy to do so, at least for a period. Where I'm seeing things that I guess I'm less comfortable with is businesses looking to their supply chains, and particularly global businesses that are putting pressure on suppliers. I've seen examples in the last few days of suppliers in India of clothing manufacturers, and you've got a huge global brand based perhaps in the United States or the United Kingdom, and we're seeing emails going out to these local suppliers saying, can you make a contribution to the current crisis by reducing your prices by, I've seen 30%, for example.
Wow.
It seems incredible that a major American or British multinational, well-known brand would be seeking from the kind of end of the supply chain where the margins are tiny to be using coronavirus as a reason to get a discount. And this includes clothing that's already been supplied but not paid for. And so I'm pretty uncomfortable with that kind of corporate bullying coming from organizations who talk about their values and partnership and use terms like that. So that doesn't occur in any way in the relocation industry.
I think certainly in terms of big global brands, and I know the companies that you're referring to, I firmly believe in the whole notion of conscious capitalism, and I also believe that that this moment in time is going to be reputationally devastating for companies who are publicly shamed for that kind of pressure on the supply chain. They will not survive because we will all choose not to buy their products. That I do firmly believe that. So, your reputation at this time hangs upon, how you're behaving, morally and ethically. So, but it's very interesting that you brought that up.
Yeah, and again, I'm not raising this to say not to have discussions with suppliers, because there can be relevant times to talk about deferment of payment, but in a genuine partnership sense. And we can all see it when there's a distinction between two partners coming together to work out some short-term fix.
For sure. And
corporate bullying, which is just saying, we expect you to reduce your prices by 30%, which, it's just not done.
It's morally bankrupt. You go on to talk about, we had discussions over the postponement of the Seville conference, because at that point, we were not in a situation to invoke any kind of force majeure. Do you want to talk us through, how those contractual obligations work?
Yes, a lot of companies are looking at their contracts just now. The ideal situation to be in is where you have a service, in this case, a relocation service contract. There is a force majeure clause, and that clause would really indicate that if some kind of third-party event, something outside the control of the parties occurs, then this is what should happen. And typically it would be suspension of the contract, perhaps termination of the contract, depending on the circumstances. And clearly the coronavirus, a global pandemic, you would expect to be covered by any kind of force majeure clause. So that's the first thing going forward. If there's no such clause, then in theory, you could have a problem with a client who said, you were under an obligation to deliver these services. I don't care that you had a practical problem in delivering them. I want compensation for your failure to deliver. In which case you have to fall back on the general law, because you'll get nothing in your contract to protect you against that kind of unfair claim. And in English law, for example, there's a concept called frustration. And frustration just says, if the kind of aims of a contract are completely frustrated by some outside event, then the court will give you protection against a claim like that. And I would imagine that most countries would have something similar, but the main point really is to make sure that your contracts do have appropriate force majeure clauses in them to avoid any dispute. I mean, I'm not picking up any sense that the kind of compensation claim that I'm mentioning is anything other than a theoretical issue just now in the relocation industry. I've not heard of claims being made. And needless to say, if following an interview like this, somebody's watching and says, yeah, but I've had this problem with a client, we'd really be interested to hear about that on a confidential basis, so that we can give advice to others.
Well, I was going to say that, and in fact, I'm going to say this in the introduction, that, don't forget, Gordon is there as a resource. He is EuRA's strategic consultant for legal. So if you do have issues, don't hesitate to get in touch with Gordon. You can do that through the LinkedIn group. You can put questions on there. Gordon monitors that and looks to. So, we're trying to provide you with the support that you need if you need it as an organization. So, Gordon is a great resource. Use it. I was reading a fascinating article yesterday about working from home and how we all got, and I've just put it in an article for the European, how we all went, oh, wouldn't we all love to work at home? No commuting anymore, and more time with the family. And actually, as it's come down to it, I think we're all kind of desperate to be back with our teams. Have you got any ideas on that?
Well, firstly, I think we should all be grateful that we had business continuity plans, business interruption plans in place, and that this happened this year as opposed to 20 years ago when the technology was obviously far more difficult and expensive. So I think for many companies, this has been the ultimate test of how these plans work. And I think the feedback I'm getting is that people are pleasantly surprised by how well their remote teams have coped. And to a large extent, I mean, it's flexibility of individual members of staff, which is fantastic, but it is also the way that we're now finding that the technology, such as Zoom, makes it relatively easy to carry on business. So what does this mean legally? I mean, I think that the one negative for the relocation industry that could come out of this would be if companies decided that they needed fewer face-to-face meetings right through to the extent of we need less employee relocation because we are now going to embrace technology to a far greater extent than we have in the past because we see it works. And actually, yeah, we trust our employees to contribute to our business from home. So we don't need to move the same number of people around the world. And it did remind me, I remember similar conversations when video technology first came out, and I'm probably thinking the 1990s, and it was incredibly expensive, but we, most of us, tested it out, and you'd go to another office where there'd be a video suite set up, and we thought it fantastic. We could link with our office in London or New York or wherever. but it was very expensive. And I think that at that time, that would be when we started having conversations about, well, what could this mean for the relocation industry? Is this a positive, or could it mark a decline in volumes? So we actually had these conversations 25 years ago, and nothing really changed in a fundamental way. And I guess the question mark I have is, will we now see fundamental changes in business practices? And what should we be anticipating as a relocation industry? Do we need to rethink the kinds of services that will be required, the kind of people who will be relocating? And you could say that we've already seen that in last decade or so. More younger, single, less families, a different type of relocation, shorter term assignments, all of that. But will this be another fundamental shift that we need to think about? So it's easy for me to throw up the question there. What the answer is, I don't know. But I think we have to be ready for potentially some fundamental changes.
I mean, you raise a very, very good point, and it's an interesting one as well, because I guess, because we've been thinking about this, and the board we've been talking about this for a long time, because what are going to be the patterns of assignments over the coming years? In my view, and this might be slightly naive, I think there will be a big shift in commuter assignments. I think that was starting to happen within corporations anyway, mainly down to their environmental policies, that you don't want people on planes all the time. I personally, from this experience, and from in my professional life, working with you, working with the board, there is nothing that equates to a face-to-face meeting.
Yeah.
And I think that's a human thing. It's human nature that we actually like to feel connected. And I think, again, having just spoken to our members over the past 4 or 5 weeks, it's those connections that are making everyone feel safe during this time. But I'm still getting WhatsApps and emails from people saying, cannot wait to get together. Next time we'll be together in DC, in Costa Rica, in Seville next year. It's going to be really interesting to see the commercial versus the human nature side of it.
Yeah, it is fascinating. I think actually conferences will continue to have huge value for the reason you've mentioned, and the kind of social side around it, the ability to make connections in a really personal way. So I don't see any impact on EuRA conferences going forward, but I am thinking, of internally in corporations, how they see the need to move people around the world to the same extent, or for business meetings. There must be a big reduction in that. And if you link it, as you mentioned, with the environmental pressures already, should we be sending this number of people on carbon damaging or carbon producing flights to the same extent as we did in the past? I think most would say no, our environmental policy requires us to look very carefully at these. So,
but you see, to me, there's a flip side to that, which is, so therefore, actually, long-term assignments become more popular because you've only got a person going on a plane once every 3 years. Do you see my point? The commuter assignments, the short-term assignments, I think there will be changes, but in terms of having the right person, the talent management in the right place at the right time, the pressure on the company will be to get them settled and get them long-term in place, I think, but that's speculative.
I like that interpretation. And it's really trying to predict what these consequences are going to be, and some will be intended, and as we know, some will be unintended. But I think you raise a good point there. It wouldn't necessarily impact directly, other than in a positive sense, in long-term assignments. I think that there would be an argument, and we will see.
We will. Compensation for loss of income and insurance. You brought that up in your article as one of the headings. Do you want to talk me through that? Because that was fascinating.
Yeah, interestingly, there's a big case about to start against the Hiscox Insurance Group in the UK, and that's from people that thought, or businesses which thought they had insurance against a pandemic, and they're being told no. It only related to individual properties and localized health issues. Um, and so that's we'll see how that one goes.
Hmm.
And
An
certainly not,
insurance company trying to get out of its obligations. How unusual.
yeah. I mean, in some ways, you can understand the problem for them because when you have a global pandemic, no insurance company could survive that.
True.
So it's just so fundamental. But you know, it will come down to the wording and the policies. And you know, if you assume that you had cover, and they're now wriggling with very tight interpretations of what words and phrases mean, you know, it doesn't look good for the insurance industry. But certainly for the vast majority of businesses, they will not have cover for this. And they won't even think they'd cover for it because really business interruption insurance is about typically about your premises. You know, they catch fire and you need an alternative. There's something specific, and it tends to be property related. And so I think there will be very few relocation firms, for example, that find they have compensation for loss of earnings as a result of the pandemic. And of course, that's exactly why governments have had to step in. If this had all been nicely covered by insurance, then businesses could relax, you know, income would pour in from insurance companies, and then we could carry on as before. But clearly that's not happening. It really couldn't happen. As I say, every insurance company would be bust, and governments would still have to step in at the end of the day. So, I mean, what I would suggest with insurance, it's always worth having a conversation with your broker to check that, you know, there might be some aspect of insurance that clicks in here. But by and large, insurance is unlikely to be a solution. And again, it may make you think about the kind of cover you have in place. You know, to what extent is business interruption cover covering the areas that you think it is? What are you paying for? What are the risks going forward? And just having greater clarity about that.
Interesting. And I mean, there wouldn't be anything, no, there wouldn't. I was just thinking about that with a lot of companies, you know, prior to the lockdowns happening across the world, we, for example, as an organization, faced quite a big cost in terms of making sure that our home working technology was secure, because we're going from a hardwired big server-based thing in the office to open networks in individual people's homes. So, you know, that kind of thing, would that necessarily be covered by your insurance if you had it?
What I would say on that is, and it's in the UK, our data protection supervising authority is called the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office. They have actually issued some coronavirus advice, and it's exactly for what you've described. It's saying it's inevitable that there'll be some drop off in security, at least from a technical point of view. Something that was absolutely secure in EuRA and is now home based and distributed, data is being distributed in a different way, which technically is less secure, but otherwise it would be impossible to carry on business.
Yeah.
And the ICO very helpfully have said, yeah, we recognize that there will be changes, and some of these will involve a loosening of standards through no fault of a business, and we'll take that into account. So I thought that was actually quite helpful, that we know nobody's going to be hammered because of a technical problem in having at very short notice to make the kind of switches that really all businesses are having to make just now.
And again, don't forget, everybody, watching, that Gordon's guide to GDPR and compliance is on the website. It's downloadable, and it just, it's interesting how when we started to think about implementing remote working, we needed to address that our systems were secure. Our IT people had to come in and remotely make sure that we had beefed up antivirus, beefed up firewalls. We're all working using VPNs, that kind of thing. So, it was costly. It was costly, but it's worth it.
Yeah, I mean, and don't get me wrong, the ICO and the other data protection authorities would still come down hard if somebody loses data. So, again, there's a distinction between, okay, there's maybe a bigger danger of cyber attack and that kind of thing. But if you still leave a laptop or a file or something that is just careless loss of personal data, the ICO will still come after you for that. So it's more about system changes are accepted, but we still have to take reasonable precautions with personal data.
And just a quick question on that, because that was something that occurred to me, was if, for example, you've had employees working up until this point, but now they're going on to furlough, and they're set up like we are, for example, where everything is cloud-based. They still have those machines at home. Access to that cloud-based data probably should be shut off, right, if you're on furlough?
Yeah, it should be. Apart from anything else, from an employer's point of view, it allows, when they're making their claim for the payments for these furloughed employees, it makes it absolutely clear they have evidence that employee was furloughed and wasn't just working at home but making phone calls in and checking emails. So yeah, I think the legal advice on that would be to remove a furloughed employee from the system.
From emails, from cloud-based file storage, everything.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I know from practical experience now that the companies are doing exactly that. They're changing passwords so that people cannot get in, and it's not just from the point of view of saying to the employees, don't come anywhere near work. It's as much about making sure that claims for compensation under the government schemes are they have evidence to support that.
Yeah, very interesting. Because again, I mean, from the point of view of, we've had massive take up from the MIM program, because obviously, even though somebody's furloughed, it doesn't mean that they can't continue their professional development. So that's actually a good way forward. I wanted to ask you one thing, which is, we've talked an awful lot over, well, basically for the last 3 years, about something which has now completely disappeared, and I have not heard the word Brexit mentioned in 2 months. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting one, and of course, we could never have an interview without mention of Brexit. It is compulsory. The interesting thing in the UK is, at the moment, we are legally committed to leaving on the 31st of December 2020. To achieve that, negotiations really have to be pretty much completed by the summer. And at the moment, it's hard to see how that can be achieved. Now, the UK government's position is still that, well, we have remote negotiations going on, that there are still technical discussions, there are 6 technical groups involved in these negotiations. So nothing has changed. But I do wonder if we won't have an announcement sometime over the next couple of months saying that Brexit will extend into 2021. And the official opposition, the Labour Party in the UK, is now calling for that.
Right.
Which maybe makes it more unlikely that the government will immediately say, yes, we will extend. but I just wonder if it's now totally unrealistic. And of course, we've had the situation of our own Prime Minister in intensive care and probably out of the picture in any leadership sense for another month.
Yeah.
So I'd like to think, I mean, clearly we all have our own feelings about Brexit, but I think genuinely there would be a strong argument to be made now for extending by 12 months to the end of 2021. But we shall see.
I never thought I'd actually welcome having, the news dominated by Brexit again, but actually I really would now. I think we've had enough of coronavirus. Gordon, it's been a real pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much for your insights. Extremely valuable, as always. And again, don't forget, Gordon is there for you. You have his email address on our website. Go to Meet the Teams, go to Strategic Consultants. You can email Gordon directly or go through the LinkedIn peer-to-peer groups. It'd be great if we maybe come back in a month and have another roundup of where we are with things. And obviously, any information that you think is necessary, just send it to me and I'll put it up straight away.
That's great. Thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you, Gordon. I really appreciate your time and your expertise, as always. Thanks so much. Lovely to see you as well. Really nice to chat. Take care.
Bye for now.
See you soon. Bye.